Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Vedic Astrology podcast. My name is Fiona Marks, and today I am with my friend and colleague, Sachin Sharma.
Hello, everyone. Thank you, Fiona, for having me back.
We seem to have caught each other at the right time for a catch-up episode today because, not to give away spoilers, but we've been talking a little bit about mythology on the Vedic Astrology podcast, and quite separately, you've also been contemplating, reflecting, and building meaning with mythology too.
Yeah, and especially so because on the day that we got in touch again, I was discussing exactly something related to what you were also exploring, and then we decided to go with that topic. So it was just so synchronistic. It was so aligned from the universe that just go ahead.
It really is, because prior to that, Sachin and I, for maybe 6 months, had been exchanging WhatsApps. Now, before we dive into the topic today, let's just share a little bit about your background and these two profound interests that you have. On one side, Vedic astrology, and on the other side, can I say Jungian psychology or psychology? Tell us a little bit about your love for those topics and how that came about and how they interact inside of you.
Jyotish, Vedic astrology in general, has been brewing within me for the past 10 years. I encountered it in 2014, January. I had already been introduced to it, coming from a Hindu background from India. So I was always introduced to astrology in some way. But it was only in 2014 that I started digging into it more. And Jung also started to show up a lot since the beginning, but I would never understand it fully. 2014 itself, I think there were moments, but very fleeting, just links online. And when you just go down the rabbit hole while researching, none of Jungian text. As my understanding of astrology became deeper, then Jung also showed up more in cycles. It drifted away, then came back with double the intensity, then drifted back away, then came back triple the intensity, until I'm just like, I gotta do it. It just makes so much sense. The bridge between the two happened because my core belief is that an astrologer, a Jyotishi, is fundamentally a counselor, a therapist, and it's an undeniable fact. Astrologers want to just merely just predict and just not take any accountability and responsibility for their speaking. So they need to be fundamentally be trauma informed. They need to have some basic understanding of the psyche, because you're dealing with moon, which is manas, and manas is your psyche, is where the ego, where the I, where the ankara resides. You need to have that sort of understanding of what you're going to predict for whom and how will this person deal with this. And then a lot of this got confirmed through all the clients that I was getting who were traumatized by astrology, by astrologers, because a part of them believed in astrology, a part of them wasn't happy, and all those predictions and insights were taking away something from them about their own power as an individual, about their own capacity for choice. So then Jung becomes like a perfect bridge, because Jung was fundamentally an astrologer at heart. He writes about it since the beginning. Even his encounters with Freud, his initial letters before he had started physically meeting Freud, he writes that my evenings are spent studying astrology, and it's a rich reservoir of beautiful insights. And then Freud says, don't just get too engaged with it. It's a matter of superstitions. And then how Jung derives a lot of his psychological types, his theory of archetypes, and how he develops it further. Jung is a process. You have to understand, Jung is not just one thing. Jung in 1913 is different from the Jung in 1930. And you need to understand his later understandings to see where he was going with his research and studies. He's a process. He's not Freud, who's just had a breakthrough in understanding and then he just ran with it for the rest of his life, unable to move around. So Jung adapted to it. So if you understand later Jung, he gets into the Vedic and texts. He gets into Sufism, and he talks about the importance of having the right kind of teachers, the right kind of guru. He says, if I have only one regret in life, it would be not finding the right kind of spiritual guru at the right time, which is so profound because he was coming to sort of understandings that are non-modernized, non-westernized Indian psyche. So Jung is like the perfect bridge because his theories are built on astrology. He tried to get in touch with B.V. Raman. It was just really something that needs to be done with bridging Jungian astrology. So I have a project on that, on Jungian Jyotish and jungianastrology.com. So everyone is most welcome to visit that website, www.jungianastrology.com.
I'm wondering, actually, is it unusual for an Indian-born astrologer to also embrace Jungian psychology? I know that Western astrologers, there's a really natural pathway for Western astrologers and Jungian psychologists. It's quite aligned, quite a strong body of practitioners. And maybe there are also Western astrologers who learn Vedic astrology who also are into Jung. But is it relatively unusual for someone born in India to come through Vedic astrology and have Jung as a specialty?
Yes, very uncommon. And not just that, like we don't know what to do with it. We have not figured out the pathway to make the connection. So even if we have these Jungian analysts in India, they're very grounded in Western ideas. As Jung would say, it causes neurosis. And that's one of the efforts of Jungian astrology, Jungian Jyotish, to bridge the two without appropriating one of the two and like creating a proper dialogue.
I'm really inspired to hear that. And all we've talked about so far this morning is timing, but it feels like a very beautiful time to be having these conversations. Let's move towards our main topic for today. And we're going to be talking about archetypes, and we're going to be talking about avatars.
So what happens when we understand the archetypes, the avatars from the context of Jyotisha is that it becomes a journey from this random chaos of these imagistic emotional urges that are spontaneously arising and drowning one into unconsciousness. It's a journey from this state to a state of this orderly structure of these thematic tales, acts. It's like a leela, a play that allows one to derive wisdom, know one's script, understand one's role in the cosmic play, and come to terms with the fundamental nature of reality. So we dissolve certain resistances towards existence, becoming conscious of these instinctual archetypal themes, these primordial patterns, primordial representations, ultimately breaking free, liberating, getting this sort of psychological moksha, first and foremost, by understanding these themes. And this has to be assisted with your psychophysical, psychospiritual yogic practices, with an understanding of Jyotish. So it's a jnana of path. And you break free from chaos. You find yourself placed in this space-time where you're placed. Regardless of good things happening to you, bad things happening to you, you understand where that's coming from, why the judgment is the way that it is within yourself. It's a perfect tool for analytic thought, for meta-analysis, metacognition, for Jungian analysis. Because Jungian analysis works a lot with symbols, motifs, images, and these sort of things. And Jyotish really connects it, like really aligns, superimposes it, and then circumambulates, does this sort of parikrama with the psyche. And you see it from different angles. It's really profound that way.
It's just the chaos of all of the inputs that we're capable of receiving as humans. You arrive here and you're just overwhelmed by the senses themselves, what we can take in through the body, into our brain, into our mind. And then there's also the whole emotional environment that one is born into. And then there's the traumas that one might experience. And that creates a whole lot of chaos that can be very difficult to find meaning in. So what you're suggesting here is that these archetypes and avatars give us a filter that helps us to turn down all the chaos that's not important and see what is the meaning.
It definitely adds this layer of meaning, and it gives us, and it's literal, like it works as a fact. So you grasp Jung on a very deep level through Jyotish, on a very experiential level.
Tell us a little bit before we even begin about what an archetype is.
The Oxford Dictionary definition of the word archetype is a very typical example of a certain person or thing. It's a very typical example. That's what it is. And so when we're understanding a graha and we're understanding its archetype, we are just understanding a very typical expression of that graha. That's the most basic, beginner-friendly version of it. So archetypes are not just these instincts and prototypical patterns and primordial images mapping reality, but they're also our capacities. They're formulae to navigate through life. For example, if someone tunes into that archetypal theme of a certain planet, you can allow yourself to embrace those themes. And India is really good at it. So if it's a kitchen, you'll find pictures of goddess Annapurna, which is the goddess of food. You manifest that, you manifest her qualities, you devote yourself to her. If it's for Ayurvedic physicians, it's Dhanvantari. For transformative, ferocious form that destroys evil, we have Durga. We have all these different themes of these sacred forms, images, and gods. So India is very good at this. And anyone who gets in touch with this would feel a sort of a psychological relief from this. And with Jyotish, it becomes a practical, experiential thing. So archetype, whether it is universal or not, we don't know, because we don't know much about the cosmic unconscious. We know about the collective unconscious. So we are speaking of this solar system. So I don't agree with this word universal, because universal in the terms of Jyotish means something else. In Vedic structure of things, universal is universal. In the Western way of saying universal, it means everywhere, universally applicable. We don't know if archetypes work beyond this solar system. Probably in a solar system where, let's say, eagles or dogs evolved into those that could meditate, those who could realize their own consciousness, the archetypes would look different than what they look here, and depending on their tools. But the archetypal theme might be universal. Theme of love might be a universal theme. Theme of the hero's journey, that's an archetypal theme. So we need to make a huge distinction between archetypes and archetypal themes, and this is so often confused in the West. It sort of grinds my gears. And it's very much confused by Jung at certain points also, because Jung says the archetype of the wise old man. This is where I beg to differ with Jung, and who am I to differ? So I just stick to begging. So I would say that wise old man is an archetypal theme that can be found in different archetypes. Varying in different cultures, you can find these archetypes, and the archetypal theme would be the wise old man. The wise old man in and of itself is not. The hero's journey is an archetypal theme on which Joseph Campbell wrote a book, which is a profound book, very beautifully written. But it's not an archetype. And then we have the idea of avatars. Avatar has a lot of different meanings depending on the tradition that's using it in India. So in Kriya Yoga traditions, avatar is used in a different context. It depends on who the teacher is. An avatar can be masters who have descended to do some work. Avatars can be these supreme beings being manifested through the grahas, as Parashara tells us in his sutras, who overcome evil, to destroy evil and establish dharma. That's the basic purpose. But avatars from a Jyotisha perspective are essentially a very typical example of that graha. That's what it is for the practical purposes. And Rishi Parashara's 10 sutras on the avataras, if you dig into those 10 sutras, they just make this very clear. What's the point and purpose, and how deities belong to these 9 planets and they manifest through these 9 planets. He makes a distinction between deities and avatars also. So avatar is being used in a very particular context. So we are, for practical psychoanalytic work, we are changing it a little bit. Avatar, from an etymological perspective, is avatara, which means descent. The divine descent. To come from a higher state of consciousness to a lower state for a certain purpose. Now, what's super interesting when we look at this idea from the perspective of Jyotisha is that even though all avatars have a core purpose of establishing dharma, which is a very important word, needs to be understood very carefully. It has a very essential meaning, that which upholds, and it has to be understood very clearly, but that's a different topic. For now, what's important is that the way that avatara is being expressed, how that purpose of establishing dharma and destroying evil is fulfilled, is expressed through the graha. The story of the avatara is in alignment with the qualities of the graha. So Rishi Parashar is touching at a very beautiful thing. It's so profound. Basically, avataras is what the idea of archetype has been, what the European scholars or the priests of ancient times were trying to get at, and what Jung theorized and built further. What's interesting about Jung finding out about archetypes is that he did not find it through India. He found it in his studies and researches in schizophrenia. And then he found out that when he's engaging into the personal unconscious of the people he's treating, there were these certain themes that were common. So then he arrived at the idea of collective unconscious and these primordial images that were appearing within all cultures, regardless of any interaction between the two cultures. And then when he comes to India, then he completely blows his mind. It's an archetypal world. Like the Indian psyche is essentially living in a mystical, magical world, an outer representation to all the contents of their psyche, all the imaginations, everything is out there. So there's a huge psychological relief that people go through to find structure in their life. Even now, like India is just big on this. Hinduism is loaded and the tapestry is so rich and it's so intricate, and the stories have subplots, subplots. And one person that appears in one story has to be made connection to from another story. And then you have these moments of joy when you figure out like the lineages and genealogies and stuff. So shall we get into the tale briefly of Narasimha and then make, let's say, correlations with Mars and try to understand Mars's energy, Mars's purpose in life?
Let's do it.
Perfect. The key person in Narasimha Avatar's tale is Prahlad. The lineage of Prahlad, it says, from Brahma came Kashyapa. Kashyapa and Diti created Hiranyakashipu, and Hiranyakashipu gave birth to Prahlad. And then from Prahlad comes Virochana, and Virochana comes Bali. So Prahlad is actually the grandfather of Bali. And Hiranyakashipu is the great-great-grandfather of Bali. So it's very interesting because the tales are also connected. So what happens is that there is this demon who's going crazy basically after his brother has been killed by Varaha Avatar. So that's also connected. There's another avatar connected. Rahu's avatar kills Hiranyakashipu's brother. So he's extremely aggrieved and he is wanting revenge from Vishnu. In these tales, Vishnu is considered as the Paramatman, the ultimate, that which cannot be named sort of thing, beyond time. So he's basically in resistance to reality itself, and he goes into this deep pain state, and he goes into this egomania. So he seeks his revenge for his brother's death by doing a lot of penance through these austerities. He gains a lot of power, but his power gets centered in his sense of self-importance, ahamkara. And then he desires immortality from Brahma for his austerities. And then Brahma, he's like, I can't make you immortal, because even I am not immortal, which is a very significant detail in these tales. He says, but what I can do is I can give you practical immortality. I'll put these clauses, and it's very difficult to navigate through them to actually kill you. He cannot be killed inside or outside by a human or a god or an animal. He cannot be killed by any man-made or god-made weapons. He cannot be killed during the day or the night. So he basically becomes fully crazy after this. He just starts killing everyone, starts taking over the worlds and invading everything. Eventually, Hiranyakashipu has a son named Prahlad. He has 4 sons. One of them is Prahlad. And Prahlad starts to show insight, like spiritual insights. Like he has this innate wisdom. And he's getting these sort of downloads, wise downloads about reality, about life. So what happens is he is a Vishnu devotee. It's expressed like that. He worships Vishnu and he's in awe of it and he knows the nuances and he gets these insights. But this really angers Hiranyakashipu, and so he sends him to an Asura school to learn all of these demonic, let's say, Asura things, which are all about how to enhance your ego and gain power and push your sense of self and your ideas into the world. Prahlad joins the school, and then there's these details about what happened in the school. All the children start getting influenced by Prahlad, and then the teachers are not able to handle him, and Hiranyakashipu gets really angry and starts to become violent towards him and almost physically abuse him. And Prahlad, his devotion is unwavering. It is what it is. I know it's true, so it's not a matter of belief for me. It's a matter of the heart revelation. I know that it's there, so I don't need, I can't help it. Even if I want to not believe it in any, I can't unsee or unrealize what I've realized. So one day, Hiranyakashipu gets really agitated with Prahlad, and it's a very key moment. So his father says, where is your Narayan? Where is your Narayana? Prahlad says, he's everywhere. So his father's like, is he there in that pillar now? If he's there, why doesn't he come out? Prahlad bows down to the pillar. Yes, everywhere. I can see him. I can see him inside the pillar, he says. So the evil king draws his sword out and pounces at Prahlad while shouting, let's see if your Narayana is here. Let's see if he comes out of that pillar to rescue you. And the pillar splits open, and there's a golden glaring face of a lion with a human body. Neither a man, neither human, neither created by humans nor gods. So the boon that he had gained from Brahma starts to fulfill. So the man lion starts to run towards Hiranyakashipu, picks him up, carries him to the threshold of the door, neither inside nor outside, places him on his lap, neither on earth nor on sky. It was dusk, so neither day nor night. Narasimha tears apart Hiranyakashipu with his nails and teeth. Weapons neither created by humans nor gods. And so he comes, he tears him apart. There's just blood all over the place and just Prahlad weeping tears of devotion. And then there's a very critical moment in the plot, that no one is able to pacify Narasimha from his anger but Prahlad. So Prahlad goes to his feet and cries tears of devotion, love, and asks him to calm down and forgive. And then Narasimha calms down. Narasimha blesses Prahlad that your lineage is blessed. And then that's why Bali is born. And Prahlad himself is born to Hiranyakashipu, who's an egomaniac. There's a background story to this, and this is the beauty of Hinduism, that it's all a dilemma. It's all a leela. It's never, this is right, that is wrong. It's all rightness and wrongness of things. The story is that there were two gatekeepers, Jaya and Vijaya, and a rishi comes to visit Narayana, and Jaya and Vijaya don't let him in because Narayana, or that ultimate power, had asked them to not let anyone in. The rishi gets angry and curses Vijaya and Jaya to be born on earth for 7 lifetimes and in deep pain, and then as humans, which is considered really bad for those that belong to the higher realms. And then Jay and Vijay get really sad and they ask Paramatman to like figure out, and they say, I can't take back the curse, and that's a common theme in all of Hindu texts, that the curses cannot be taken back, but they can be altered. Not the curse itself, but a new boon, or they can be navigated. So Paramatman says that you can either be born for 7 lives as human beings or for 3 lives as extremely evil people, and I will descend, avatar, I will come as an avatar and take away your life. They choose to be killed by God and for 3 lifetimes instead of being incarnated as for 7 lifetimes as humans. So I think Jay and Vijay, one of the two, one was Hiranyakashipu, and the other one was the one that Varaha Avatar Rahu kills in these tales. Then Ravana was one of them.
The evil characters in these stories are actually also fulfilling their fate from a previous story, from a previous decision that maybe they had a choice or didn't have a choice. They did an action, and the consequences of that turned into them incarnating in these stories. It's really interesting because it broadens our understanding. Like, the human mind is so trapped in the lifetime view, isn't it? It's, I was born, this is my life, I'm doing things, and then it's all over and I'm dead. So I don't care what happens after that. And these stories are enticing the mind to imagine, what if actually it's a much bigger story that you are a part of, and this is a small couple of pages in your epic experience.
Exactly. That's exactly that. That's why we are all about Sakshi Bhav, which is state of observance, state of spectatorship. And it requires practice. It's a skill, like anything in life. And Buddha was really interesting avatar because he was the avatar of Mercury. So his enlightenment is a skill. Because Mercury is all about learning skills. Isn't that fascinating? That's what was Buddha's purpose. That, yeah, he was Mercury's avatar. And Mercury is just trial and error. So Buddha was going through trials and errors. Now, how this is psychoanalytically relevant to us is that this tells us how anger is a part of your psycho-spiritual structure, Mars. But what was one of the interesting themes about the Prahlada episode of Narasimha is that Prahlada can also be perceived as the inner child. So showing up for the inner child, at some point there's this righteous anger which has to protect the innocence of the inner child. All the icons, all the images and symbols and myths and motifs that show up in the temples in India around Narasimha, all the images are all either fierce form of Narasimha with his nails digging into Hiranyakashipu, or with Prahlad being blessed. So Mars has these two forces. Mars has this power to protect the innocent, and that protection is the blessing. The Prahlad is blessed by Narasimha's protection. And this ferocious form which needs to jump in and protect the situation and then go away. An unhealthy expression of Mars would also be you get into an anger state and you don't come out of it. That's a trauma response. So something happened, you got angry, you defended yourself. For example, someone tried to hit you in the parking lot and was being racist, and you didn't defend yourself. You just stood there, got hit. You didn't move, you didn't run, you didn't do anything about it. And a healthy Mars can either let it go, move out of the situation, is done and it's done. But if there is a lingering thing which stays with you, that cleansing needs to be a psychological, emotional, lunar process with all these elements. That's a work on the level of the moon. So moon is the processing center for all the elements. Mars in and of itself is just an element. We need to understand. From an archetypal perspective, the images of the archetypes are presenting themselves in moon, within the landscape of the psyche. The psyche is the moon, and psychological work is lunar work, and self-solar work. It's the rhythm between sun and moon. But these elements are in and of itself unconscious elements. Fire has no consciousness. Everything has consciousness in that way, but it cannot meditate. Sun can meditate. You as consciousness can meditate. Mars cannot meditate. Mars is just an archetypal pattern. It's an instinctual reaction. It's an unconscious force. It's a natural force. It's an element. And that element, when it presents itself onto wood, it burns the wood. When that element exerts itself upon the psyche, it presents the psyche with these images. Those images are the archetypal themes and the archetypes. It presents itself in these archetypes. Avataras from a psycho-spiritual Jyotish perspective are essentially archetypes. I can argue this all day long with anyone, but that's what it is. So we have many symbols within the tale. We have Hiranyakashipu, which represents power, how power can corrupt if it's grounded in ego, if it's grounded in a selfless, more cultivated state. Then power can be used for good things. But when it's in an ego state, which is attachment, he was attached to his brother, he lost his brother, it pained him. That pain created evil within him. So his energy got anchored into this ego state and led him to go into a state of ignorance, delusion. He gained extraordinary powers through his focus and dedication. So that shows that he came from Maharishi Kashyapa's lineage. He wasn't just this random guy. He comes from Kashyapa Diti's lineage. So he was a Maharishi's son. You're well raised. Even there's an instance in the story where after he loses his brother, everyone is grieving. And he begins to give a discourse about Atman. But that's what's important here, because that's also symbolic that you can have an intellectual, heart-based understanding of Atman, of consciousness, but ultimately, regardless of him knowing about Atman, he had to fulfill a certain destiny. He had to go into a state of ignorance. So it's not enough. It's beautiful to have that, because all the people in his kingdom were actually pacified by his discourse on Atman, a satsang on Atman, on Atma, but it didn't really work for him. He still went into a craze because he had to be killed by a Narasimha Avatar, and it had to play out. So that's a very Sanatana Dharma sort of theme. Things have to play themselves out many ways.
If we look at that, he is actually resolving a previous karma by living one of these 3 births as a demon. In fact, then the righteous purpose of this demon is to draw forth Vishnu from the pillar, and how powerful that is. We're still telling this story today. It's like the Christ story of the sacrifice on the cross, something so symbolically powerful that it opens people's hearts and minds and gives them faith. So he had to go. In fact, he was living his dharma. To be this evil demon, to be just outrageously destructive and unfair, was what called Mars to protect the innocent. And without that, then the demonstration of the power of the all-present God that is in all life, it doesn't become manifest and isn't seen. And it's a bit like this story that you've shared, that this terrible demon who is terrorizing everyone is actually fulfilling a purpose that without him, this man lion would not have come into existence. We wouldn't have this great example of Mars.
To bring it into a psychoanalytic space for self-analytic work, understand who the Hiranyakashipu is within your psyche, who the Prahlad is within you, who, how, and when, and for what Narasimha will show up. There's so much drama with just these three things. Your inner critic can be your Hiranyakashipu, your Prahlad can be your creative self, and your Narasimha is this force of this righteous anger to protect the innocent creative force within you against that inner critic which blocks you from experiencing your inner child. That's one way to utilize these tales. And this is not the same with Jupiter, not the same with Saturn. So this is very much peculiar, unique to just Mars.
That's such a powerful tool for people to reflect on. As I've been listening to you today, I've been thinking of that. I always call it the victim triangle.
Yeah, it's called Karpman's drama triangle.
A perpetrator, a victim, and a rescuer. But what you're actually sharing here is that Mars is the victim realizing that they have Shakti. They've got power and they can defend, protect, and, as you say, free their relationship with their inner child.
Yeah. And that's where the yogic metaphysics comes into the processes and the psychoanalytic work to actually work on that martial energy with the tools that we have in a psychotherapy to work with Mars and engage in a way that Narasimha within you can show up and release you into a creative expression. And it's a little bit of a journey of this process, and it can be indeed very powerful. My main point is that the Jungian approach to the Vedic archetypes, to the avataras, to these themes can really take us to a very deep space using the birth chart. And it's just not this mere tool for prediction or just seeing yourself as someone under the influence of these stars and being pushed and pulled around by the forces of time. You can actively engage with your personal unconscious and understand its relationship to the collective unconscious. Your own birth chart is the personal unconscious, and the transit chart is the collective.
Okay, there's a whole nother podcast. Like, you just drop that in, Sachin. Okay, so that's the next one we're catching up about. Can I delineate something about what I'm hearing in your language? And I want to make sure that I'm hearing this correctly. What I think I'm hearing is something between the sun and the moon as being luminaries, as having a particular state of consciousness or ability to raise consciousness or awareness, and the other 5 planets being elements, being the 5 elements. Is that what I'm hearing?
Yeah, they're not conscious.
Okay, so the luminaries, we're saying that the sun is conscious and that the moon can host the sun's consciousness or something like that?
And make it earthly matter. Otherwise, sun is not an earthly matter. Sun and moon rhythms create us turn us into an earthly thing, a humanoid experiencing reality and its mundaneness and its spiritual aspect. The spiritual aspect of reality is the solar side, and the mundane, practical, day-to-day, emotional, feeling-centric aspect is the lunar, which makes life enjoyable, traumatic, gives it different kinds of flavors, and sun makes it more about vision and creative energy that you want to build something, and this side which gives you intelligence, divine downloads, and this is the thing, this is the next thing. You think you thought it, but it just appeared. If you really look into it and just saw it, just pops out. Yeah, I'm not thinking and speaking right now. It's sun. It's just me speaking.
Planets are the elements. So you're outlining Mars as being fire.
Mars is fire, Jupiter is ether, Akash, and Saturn is air, Mercury is earth, and Venus is water. And they are not conscious. Planets are not conscious forces. That is, they're not entities that have consciousness. That's misunderstanding. They are very powerful natural forces. They're nature, and they are prakritik, they're natural. When the psyche engages with these on the psyche's level, it experiences them as these imagistic themes. And this is what Jung was a genius at. He grasped this idea really well, though he was building on it. And that's why I call my effort with Jungian astrology as an unfinished dialogue between Jung and Jyotish. It's an unfinished dialogue that needs to be finished. And there's a lot that can be dug out of this conversation. There's a reason why these symbols are placed within these themes, why these themes are interrelated, correlated in so many intricate ways. They're pointing us towards psychological facts which need to be transcended within the solar system for us to realize a higher reality. So metaphysical structure of reality as revealed by Jyotish, one has to really engage with it. It will poke and put pressure on different parts of ourselves. Idealistic states that we thought, oh, I'm holier than thou. And then there's a certain eclipse, certain transit, and there's a certain mess within your psyche that you don't know where it's coming from. And it's very humbling. And that's part of the shadow work. And Jung was very clear about this. You don't have ideas, ideas have you. So you have to understand what idea you are possessed by right now, which is triggering your anger, and where's that emotional response coming from, and how to heal that in a way that ultimately makes you come into a better state of being and then gives you enough strength, courage to help others. Mars identity issues are all lunar issues, sun issues. Mars is just energy, how it comes like a force, protects, Prahlad, lead. Krishna is identity related. If you understand Krishna, if you understand Rama, it was all about upholding these ideals and setting these standards for the kingdom. The identity related is all sun and moon. Varaha has nothing to do with identity. It's fulfilling a purpose. Yeah. It's very beautiful.
It is very beautiful. Are you implying that it is the moon that receives those images? Is that what you were saying before?
Yeah. Me as Sachin Sharma is thinking about Narasimha, and when I imagine this images that are coming up with Narasimha, because I've seen these images, is happening within my moon. So only the moon can experience stuff. And sun is the light. Moon is running on sun's borrowed light. There are sutras in the Rig Veda about the one that uses the borrowed light of the Atman, something like that. They're referring to the moon, or the Soma, the one that is on the borrowed light.
Good. All right. And taking us right back to the very first question, do you want to articulate archetype, archetypal themes, and avatar? Do you want to try and distinguish those? Are they on a continuum? Are they in a hierarchy?
Archetypes is Narasimha. Archetypal theme is protection of the innocent, which can be found in other archetypes also. Christ was also probably protecting innocent. That's a theme that can arise in different ways and with different archetypes. And the avatar is the idea that Paramatman descends through the expression of one of the grahas depending on which energy is imbalanced within the solar system. So if there is lack of understanding of spiritual practices, then Buddha has to come to reinstate the methods. So Buddha didn't come up with new stuff. He did a meta-analysis, which is Mercury, and organized all the knowledge, took out what's useful, removed what's useless, created lists, Eightfold Path, Four Noble Truths, all these lists, which is all mercurial themes. And he's like, here's the thing. This is the process formula. It's come from my trial and error. Follow this formula and you'll get to a better place than where you are. Patanjali is the same way. So you can say Patanjali is also the Mercury's avatar. So avatar is this idea that Paramatman, Narayana, Vishnu, whoever, is manifesting through one of the grahas to fulfill a certain purpose or balance out the energies within the collective unconscious.
And so then are the planets, are they archetypes?
The planets have archetypes. Planets are energies. They are elements. This idea in archetypal astrology that planets are archetypes is not true. The key difference is that archetypal astrology sees the planets as archetypes and grounds all of its theories in Mars archetype. So in Jungian Jyotish, avataras and archetypes are a part of the system of the planets. So planets are also expressed as the kingdom. They're also expressed as grains, weathers, different parts of time, as elements. Panchamahabhutas, which is a very critical system with gunas. There's tamasic planets, sattvic planets, and rajasic planets, and stuff like that. So all these things are depicted as different themes. For psychoanalytic work, the avatara theme becomes really important. But graha is not an archetype. It's not an avatar. An avatar is being birthed through a graha. It's expressing graha-ness of that graha.
Yeah.
The qualities and characteristics of that graha.
Sachin, I know that we have barely scratched the surface of what it is that we want to talk about, even though we have covered all this territory already. So can I ask you to join me again on another episode to continue our exploration? Would you come back and continue this conversation with me later?
Anytime. I love it. There's a lot to digest. We've covered so much territory, as you said, and beautiful. I'd love to be back.
Great. And in the meantime, Sachin, can you just remind people in between these episodes, if they want to get in touch with you or hear more about these themes, can you share that website again?
My main website is www.searchandsachin.com. SEARCHSACHIN, Search in Sachin, and the Jungian Astrology website, where I'm working on Jungian Jyotish and all the themes that we've spoken about today, is jungianastrology.com. I'd love to have you there. Yeah. Please visit. Yeah,
good. All right. So everybody listening, don't worry. We're going to be back. In the meantime, go check out Sachin's website and interact there. And that just leaves me with wishing you a lovely day, Sachin, and see you next time we get together.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.